Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to GW Center for Integrative Medicine. So this is our ongoing YouTube channel. So today we have here with us somebody you've seen before, Dr. Jennifer Rue. And you've seen her in a sort of Ayurvedic and yoga therapist and compassion cultivating trainer and a professional spiritual care expert with us. But today we have a very, very different topic. So many of you probably don't know that Dr. Ruiz also serves as a director of Planetary Health Initiative at GW Washington Center for Integrative Medicine. And also, she'll talk to us about a lot of other engagement with planetary health at the wider GW enterprise, but also at other local institutions, even NIH. Be really interested to hear it. So, Jennifer, without any further ado, people know you. Let's jump right in. What are we talking about? Planetary health sounds very vague, big, global. How can the individual get involved in this?
Right. So it is a giant topic, but it affects everybody. Everybody is concerned with this. We know that people are experiencing echo anxiety and echo grief on a regular basis. For a lot of people, they don't have mechanisms for expressing or processing that. So that's very important. And I think, the research has shown that what's really therapeutic
Mhm.
for echo anxiety and echo grief is activism of some kind of collective action that one can take or individual action, so one can feel like they're participating in change. So I am an affiliate with the Center for the Climate Health Institute, which is out of public health at GW, and they are engaged in a lot of research and a lot of activities. And one of the upcoming things, which you'll be hearing about for the first time as well, is I'm doing a climate cafe for incoming freshman students on the Mount Vernon campus on at the very end of this month, which is an initiative associated with the Climate Health Institute and also CAPS. And we're just going to try that and see how it goes, see if students find that supportive. But that's something that can also be offered at the community level. And what I really want to highlight here is the ability to offer planetary health assessments through GWCIM, which would happen on an individual basis. But when the individual comes for a planetary health assessment, they learn, what can I do for my own to improve my health status and well-being in terms of individual behaviors, but also what behaviors can I engage in that promote planetary health and well-being at a community level and also at a biosphere level, because we do have some ability to impact that. So as you say, not everybody really knows what planetary health refers to. So I do have some slides that I thought I would share today, and I'll just pull those up and then we'll just go through this little by little. So here we're talking about the connections between individual, community, pan-species, and biosphere well-being. And when we talk about other species, our fate is really intertwined with other species. And I think we tend to forget that sometimes. And we tend to really, human beings as a species, have a sort of arrogance about their place in the world. So we'll talk about the concept of biophilia and our relationship with other species as well. So I just want to actually play this video, which is really quick, which gives you a sense of
The
where we are.
stage is set. What a sense of anticipation.
Wherever you're watching this in the world, I really, really hope you're set for a spectacular evening.
The arena is heating up.
Here we go.
Set. It's a European record to Greece. Unbelievable. What's happening with Mozambique? They got something. They got it.
France joins the race.
Pakistan, wow. Where did they come from?
It's now or never for Brazil. A national record. The place erupts.
More challenges coming up. All very similar in the way they attack. What a hit! A world record!
So that kind of just gives you an idea of where we are with planetary health. We have a lot of ongoing simultaneous crises, and the UN Environment Program has termed this the triple planetary crisis. We have rapid global warming, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So these negatively synergize with pandemics, the spreading of zoonotic diseases, and increasing serious wars and global conflicts. Anthropogenic changes and multidimensional health impacts include changing infectious disease patterns, changing non-communicable disease patterns, changing nutritional disease patterns, mental health, reproductive health, housing crises, displacement, climate refugees, forced migration, natural resource commodification, hoarding of land, loss of food sovereignty, corporate and national kind of competition and avarice, malnutrition, and we have a malnutrition and obesity syndemic. So in certain countries we have obesity, and in other countries we have malnutrition. And with the advent of ultra-processed food, we even have simultaneously both occurring, people that are obese and also malnourished at the same time. We have changes in child development, readiness, loss, lifespan, and quality of life. So these, it's not a positive sort of a picture, but there are plenty of things that we can do. So that's what I want to really focus on here. So the definition of planetary health is a solution-oriented transdisciplinary field in a global movement focused on analyzing and addressing the impacts of human disruptions to Earth's natural systems on human health and all life on Earth. So the current Earth crisis is so extensive that it's driving a global humanitarian crisis. And planetary health includes an understanding of traditional and place-based knowledges, sciences, and cultural competencies, and utilizes all ways of knowing, including the latest science and millennia of traditional and indigenous knowledges, to influence agricultural systems and healing paradigms that will meet demand and reduce pressure on natural systems. So that's going to be a focus of what we talk about today, what the traditional world medicines have to offer in terms of this crisis. So this is just a little bit about the biophilia hypothesis, which is was coined in the 1960s, actually kind of simultaneously by a few different thinkers. But it's the understanding of the human being's natural attraction to the natural world and to our basic kind of necessity to be involved with the aliveness and vitality of nature. So it has benefits for our cognitive development, our sense of spiritual meaning and satisfaction. It triggers a virtual process involving concern for the environment and pro-environmental behavior. And this innate biophilia that is part of the human condition steers our relationship with nature, including a preference for natural environments to aid recovery from an attentional fatigue and psychophysiological stress. So, and there are plenty of studies on this, that time spent in nature is beneficial physiologically, psycho-emotionally, and also spiritually in terms of our sense of our understanding in the world. So, for even at a kind of that most basic level, we need to preserve nature in terms of the benefits it provides our health and well-being. So this is a really interesting graphic that someone created to depict a biophilic revolution. So on the left, you see an attitude of power over nature, and on the right, you see an understanding of our place within nature. So on the left, you see that the human species kind of thinks in terms of privileged humans, marginalized humans, and then everything else on this tree of life. But actually, the reality is that we are somewhere within these little two leaves on the left-hand side of the tree, and we're just, all animals, including the human species, are just one of those leaves. So that's a type of humility that we really need to cultivate in order to have a positive impact on planetary health. So at the Center for Integrative Medicine, there are a lot of providers who are engaged in traditional world medical systems and indigenous medicine to a certain degree, indigenous, not necessarily First Nations communities in the West, but other indigenous cultures like Ayurvedic medicine from India. And some of the values that are really important from the traditional world medicines that relate to planetary health are relationship, respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. A lot of traditional societies have an understanding that that nature has its own rights and that there should be legal recognition of the rights of nature and a personhood designation for nature. So some communities advocate for ecocide as a crime within international law so that we can really regulate and hold people accountable who are harming the earth, and to recognize Indigenous first law around the globe, because Indigenous first law is very invested in supporting the health of the planet. And really to emphasize the moral dimensions of protecting life on Earth and ensure that planetary health curricula are embedded in all programs and faculties across institutions and universities and educational programs in order to foster planetary health citizenship, regardless of discipline, because planetary health is really a transdisciplinary field. So just to give a sense of the evidence base for traditional and Indigenous medical sciences, these are used by 82% of the world's population. And unfortunately, data is not collected on these medical sciences as often as it should be. And so this quote is just that if you don't count traditional medicine, then traditional medicine doesn't count. So we need to pay more attention in the evidence-based literature to what is out there describing these systems and demonstrating their efficacy. So in PubMed, there are 98,000 results for traditional Chinese medicine, 50,000 for Indigenous health and medicine, 36,000 for acupuncture, 12,000 for Ayurveda, and 8,000 for yoga. So, you'll sometimes hear people say, oh, well, that's very nice, but there's not really an evidence base. And I think this demonstrates that the evidence base is really very robust. So this is a very sad video, which I will play for you, but it's just to remind us that we are not separate from this polar bear, that our fates are intertwined. And there's a concept and philosophy of One Health, which is the intersection of human health, animal health, and environmental health. And, if we abandon nature and wild animals, then we also are abandoning ourselves. And so the planetary health movement really seeks this kind of interspecies justice. And this particular film was from 2017 in the Canadian Arctic, and just demonstrates the impact of climate change on polar bears in the region. This is an emaciated animal looking for food. He doesn't have his natural food sources anymore. And basically, this is a depiction of an animal who's in the process of dying. And these people who saw this animal were really impacted by this. So just to kind of remind ourselves that Indigenous medical systems are very scientific, but it's a form of science that is really heart-centered. And in the literature, you can find a variety of publications on two-eyed seeing, which is a way of learning to see from the strengths of Indigenous knowledge and also with the strength of mainstream knowledges, and synergizing the two for the benefit of everyone. And the Earth is an interactive, living, sentient organism that depends on collaborative relationships for overall survival and well-being. And there's an awakened sense of interdependence between people and planet, which is achieved through a gradual process of awareness and action that depends on the inherent human potential for relationality. So when we think about relationship, it becomes very important. And that's where the spiritual dimension of planetary health really becomes important. We can talk about mindfulness, we can talk about cultivating awareness, we can talk about meaning and purpose, which are all kind of spiritual aspects of integrative healthcare, but they're all important in terms of understanding the need and the benefits of prioritizing a planetary health. So here we are again with the fact that planetary health is a values-driven transdisciplinary field. It focuses on relationship, respect, reciprocity, responsibility, regeneration, interdependence, and equity. And part of, within planetary health, respect for the Mother Earth is considered to be a feminine entity. And so respect for the feminine is considered to be a very important aspect of a planetary health perspective from traditional world medicines. And relationships between self and community, traditional ecological knowledge, land tenure rights are important. Traditional traditional communities and indigenous communities have very good track records in terms of preserving land and traditional land use that is conservation oriented. So those land tenure rights are important. Retention of language is important for indigenous people's health, and intergenerational projects are also really important, really elevating elders and children. So interdependence with other species and a sense of place helps maintain wellness and balance. And what we have largely in modern Western culture is an ideology of independence, which leads to a sense of entitled ownership and a kind of utilitarian perception of the natural world. And that's where we get this power over the natural world sort of perspective and an extractive sort of relationship with natural resources, which is transactional in nature. And it kind of skips over and negates that sense of responsibility, care, and love between the human species, animal species, and the natural world. So an indigenous approach or a traditional world medicine approach is more contextual, holistic, it's nonlinear, and it is explicitly relational. And the planet is going to benefit when the Western scientific paradigm openly and actively respects other knowledge systems, and when government policies and laws reflect an earth-centered worldview. So, we're sort of talking broad picture here, but one of the things I wanted to highlight was this idea of kincentricity, which is came from Leslie Marmon Silko, who's an indigenous author, and he's just highlighting the fact that indigenous people view both themselves and nature as part of an extended ecological family that shares ancestry and origins. So a lot of the traditional world medicines, we refer to them as nature-based and root cause oriented, but we sometimes don't strongly enough emphasize the fact that in these medical sciences, nature is, considered really a being that we're interacting with on a regular basis, and that the level of respect we have for our environment and for the natural world is that which we would have for someone we considered family. So likewise, there's some really interesting things we can think about in terms of our relationship with animals, which a lot of animals have really innovative kind of inbuilt physiological mechanisms. Like this Stenocara beetle has an evolutionary hack to help it pull water out of thin air. And so in science, in traditional cultures, but also in science, we use a lot of biomimicry, which means that we look at nature and we look at animals and we see what are the innovative and very smart things they're doing to solve human design challenges. And in being able to imitate them, we can also help ourselves. And so this was a recent article about this orangutan who used a herbal medicine for healing purposes. And there were scientists observing this animal at the time, and they thought, oh, this is a brand new thing. This is the first time this has happened. But almost certainly this has happened, for centuries and centuries. And it's just that, we've begun to pay more attention to the intelligence of animals and their relationship with plants and their understanding of how in the wild they take care of themselves and use their resources for healing. Earlier this year, at New York University in April of this year, several hundred scientists signed a New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness. And I want to just provide a few examples of why they've decided to make such a statement. So recent studies have included things like the demonstration of REM sleep in jumping spiders. So that evidence for REM sleep in a terrestrial invertebrate, it really challenges our understanding of this sleep state, which we've previously really understood to be a sort of a human phenomenon. So that's one example. And then here are a few other examples. Octopi appear to experience pain, and the experience of pain and pleasure is one really typical definition of sentience. And then there is a study of cuttlefish who appear to exhibit episodic memory. And the question is, where is the overlap between sentience and consciousness? Is memory part of consciousness? So a few other examples include studies on self-awareness in animals. So a study on zebrafish exhibited that they appear to demonstrate curiosity. So they were exposed to novel objects, and they voluntarily engaged in cognitive stimulation opportunities, which is a form of curiosity. There are also sort of studies of animals who see themselves in the mirror and what types of behavior they demonstrate. Like this dolphin here is looking in a mirror, and the question is, do animals think the animal that they see is themselves or another animal? And where are these kind of boundaries in terms of self-awareness? There have also been another couple studies on bumblebees that engage in play by rolling wooden balls, and this is not a functional activity, and so it appears to be just purely for their engaging in play behavior. And then crayfish, this is one of the most interesting to me, a study of crayfish who, when they are exposed to harassment by another crayfish or some kind of dominating behavior, they exhibit anxiety, and that anxiety responded to treatment with an anxiolytic, as it would in humans. So the question kind of continues for us: are we so different and more superior than animals that we are justified in treating them with cruelty and the same extractive and oppressive approach we reserve for our interactions with nature? So a One Health kind of understanding of planetary health means that we really have a lot of respect and regard for both the plant and animal kingdoms. This is Antonio Gutierrez from the UN, just kind of making the case again for planetary health.
Climate change is here, it is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable. Leaders must lead. No more hesitancy, no more excuses, no more waiting for the others to move first. There is simply no more time for that. It is still possible to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and avoid the very worst of climate change, but only with dramatic, immediate climate action.
So greed is a common denominator in the planetary health crisis, and this affects the treatment of indigenous people, exploitation of animals and plants, an extractive attitude towards natural resources, and even the current state of the U.S. healthcare system, which is owned by private equity and venture capital. And once that happens, they're really legally bound to prioritize return to investors over healthcare outcomes. And that's kind of how we've gotten into this situation of 15-minute visits and things like that, which aren't very patient-centered. So we really have to rely on international law and governance. And currently, there's been a lack of political will to prevent additional biodiversity loss or attending to global warming, pollution, and all the resulting negative impacts on human, animal, and plant health.
Climate.
This is Greta Thunberg. She's just really demonstrating that even though eco-anxiety and eco-grief are real, they're not a form of catastrophizing, which is why they really don't respond to a typical therapeutic approach. Because catastrophizing in terms of climate crisis is actually very rational. And so one of the wonderful things that can be done is collective action. And really focusing on people power and engaging with what kinds of health routines and behaviors we can adopt that are good for us, but also good for other species and for the planet. And this relates to climate cafes, which I hope at some point we will offer through GWCIM, which is a very loose, informal kind of group support experience about processing emotions related to climate anxiety and eco grief. And it's been demonstrated with evidence to be really very, very effective in getting people out of a sort of a stuck place around this issue. And just doing that with an understanding that the knowledge bases of traditional world medicines and indigenous communities are really a place where all this wisdom currently resides. So we're really not in a position of having to reinvent the wheel. We really need to engage more with those systems and combine them with our modern understanding of healthcare science and treatment, and expand our view. So let's just lastly listen to Greta Thunberg just talk about how taking action is very therapeutic.
I would say that it's very understandable to feel overwhelmed, because the things we're talking about, the things we're dealing with, are existential threats to humanity, unlike anything the world has ever seen before. So it's very understandable to not know exactly where to begin and what to do about it. And that's why, for me, it helped to do something concrete, and that I started to read up more about it. I started to educate myself. And when I became fully aware of it, I sort of knew myself what I could do. And then I made the decision to start school striking for the climate. But also, as I mentioned earlier, connect with other people who feel the same thing, who share the same values as you. Because when you're together in this struggle, then there are no limits to what you can accomplish.
So that's kind of what I wanted to share today, Misha, and I hope we're able to at some point do a part 2 where we can talk about some more really specific behaviors and strategies that people can engage in, where they, it will give them really a sense of empowerment. I'm promoting my own health, but I'm also doing something good for my community and for the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about just general, like particularly I'm interested in this concept of your cafes, planetary cafes. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So
I would say that it's very understandable.
Climate cafes are basically a group experience. It's very fluid. Oftentimes they begin with a climate emotions wheel, which is a tool that was developed by somebody to really focus on what is the specificity of the emotions that are evoked by climate anxiety and eco grief, because they are a little bit different than other types of stressors that we encounter. And to really get people to connect with their feelings around it, and to process and to talk with others in a group setting, and then to translate that into what can I do? What's an action I can take for myself, but also in a collective way? And how can I find other people who have a similar concern to me, so that I don't feel isolated, I don't feel alone, I don't feel, overwhelmed, basically, by what is a very real crisis. So those are, I hope we can start offering them at the center. Like I said, we're doing one for incoming students on the GW Mount Vernon campus at the end of the month. And, the research has demonstrated that they're very effective in just getting people out of a stuck place and giving them enough kind of grounding in their own emotions, but also just a little bit of information to make them feel like, oh, I can get outside my own head about climate crisis, and I can start to do things that make me feel like I can, contribute to change.
Yeah, I mean, I find that it's still the uptick in importance of this topic has been very slow. I'm noticing, for example, the way GW is kind of working around this, and other organizations. I mean, everybody understand that this is critically important. Everybody understand that we have to immediately incorporate this into every aspect of living. And yet there's this, I don't know, I don't think it's an inertia based on political disinterest. I think it's simply an inertia of we do things this way, and we don't see an immediate impact of this topic on anybody instantly, and thus we're just going to wait and see what everybody else is doing. It's kind of this kind of usual. It reminds me how people address any other global threatening topics, that if you do nothing, eventually it'll be catastrophe, but it's eventually. That the critical word here is that we don't necessarily seeing enough of this impact. Or rather, it's not that we're not seeing, we're simply closing our eyes. I mean, we drove yesterday or a couple of days ago from my parents from Philadelphia to DC, and there was this crazy torrential rain. And I'm like, and I bet nobody who was driving thought that this is part of the climate change. Everybody's like, oh, whatever. And this is the thing. People who are affected this dramatically, like increasing tornadoes, increasing storms, they're not even realizing that this is all tied together. And I think the first step is to start constantly thinking about it. Because if you don't think about this, you're not going to engage in anything. Like the fact that, for example, approaches like your cafes or other things are just taking slow in uptake is because nobody pay, like the people don't see this important. They're not realizing the criticality of what is about to happen in upcoming decades. And I've been increasingly more concerned, but I'm like everybody else. I have a hard time practically wrapping my head around it, so I applaud that at least you saying, okay, let's do this for now. What other things long term do you think we should start planning in terms of actual logistics of working? And I'm not just saying specifically working with clinic. I think a bit more globally, like how can all of us, in addition to, I don't know, recycling and paying attention to our consumption, like what else can we do immediately in terms of the planetary health?
Right. So, so first of all, I think it's really important to make the point that though there are many things we can do on an individual level, it's really corporate entities that are responsible for large amounts of greenhouse gas emissions that are the most impactful in a negative way on the climate. And actually, the U.S. healthcare system is contributing, I think, about 10% of global greenhouse gases. So our healthcare system, the way that it functions, it's not conservation and sustainability oriented. So we need to look at some of those practices.
Hospitals are like one of the top waste generating facilities.
Exactly, waste generators. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even our food use, high income countries waste a lot of food, and food waste is also very negative for the environment. And low-income countries spend the least on food, but they also have produce the least waste. Now, of course, as is a lot of healthcare issues, inequalities are really important here, because though the high-income countries are having the most negative effects on the climate, it's the low-income countries that see the consequences of that, right? See the very serious hurricanes, the very serious flooding. We do see a lot of wildfires here. But that's why I played the video at the beginning, because to really remind us, it might not be in your town today, but it's happening everywhere all the time simultaneously now. And unfortunately, what climate scientists are seeing is that the negative Earth changes are constantly outpacing their predictions. They continually are having to revise their predictions about when certain things are going to happen. And I think there are, if I'm remembering correctly, there are 9 planetary thresholds that are really of great concern with climate crisis, and we've surpassed already 6 of them. So it really is dire. I think it's more a process of denial and suppression than it is that it's an eventuality. It's already here, and it's
the belief in this topic is not universal. I mean, I periodically see you in different media voices that are saying, this is all bullshit. There is no climate change, that we're being lied to because some people want to make money on this stuff. I think this level of denialism is going to continue until you practically can deny the change, right? The thing though, that when that comes to that point, the consequence is going to be so dire that if you don't prepare for that now, you're going to end up personally in a major disadvantage. So what I'm trying to say here to listeners is not just the fact that, okay, there's a global societal problem. Individually, you're going to spend a lot of money on certain things. You're going to potentially run into catastrophic complications that will eat all your resources all at once. There will be basically things like, because on demand on certain infrastructural pieces, let's say you live in a pretty moist environment, your AC completely dies, and then in 2-3 days your house is totally molded and unlivable, like literally.
Right. Yes.
There-
I mean, exactly.
yeah, so there are things that people not realizing, not seeing, or they simply saying, whatever, I'll deal with this when it comes to that.
Right. Kicking the can down the road is not a functional strategy. I mean, there are potentially food shortages. There are potentially, electricity blackouts. I mean, the amount of water is the most destructive, force on the planet, really. And so the amount of flooding, the lack of water or lack of clean water to ingest, giving over so much of the Earth's surface to livestock for purposes of, eating meat is really very problematic. So shifting to a mostly plant-based diet is very important for the planet of the health of the planet. And, not engaging with single-use plastic containers, bottled water, all the BPAs and the forever chemicals in a lot of these plastics. I mean, they're endocrine disruptors. They contribute towards endocrine problems, metabolic syndrome, obesity. Ultra-processed foods are terrible for the planet. The amount of processing and chemicals that are involved in the production of these foods, produces its own level of toxicity. So, just joining a farmer's community-supported agriculture or farmer's market is a wonderful thing, because typically farmers are also really low-income individuals. So you are promoting the economic welfare of somebody who's contributing to society, and you're also doing something great for your own health. So those are some of the strategies I like to talk about the next time we meet. What can people do so that they can feel empowered? And of course, not driving a vehicle with gas emissions is another big one.
Right. So let's talk about, let's do in some weeks, let's do a bit more like specific Q&A and a bit more practical approach.
Yeah.
Maybe we should even consider doing kind of a sample cafe virtually and invite somebody in, that we can have a more recorded dialogue this way. So let's think about that. I think the more practical we get with this, the better it is, because I think even if just you and I talk, it's still going to be, our particular agenda. I think it would be really nice to invite community members who are really engaging in this, and then have more like a more realistic dialogue. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to go big picture today, because I think, one of the way we change our behaviors is to change our attitude first. So when we really think, I need to, revere nature and see it as sacred, and I need to have proper regard for other species in the plant and animal kingdoms, then we begin to really review our behavior in a different way and have that kind of, cultural humility at a human level, that this is a symbiotic kind of ecological, system. And thinking of just myself ultimately is self-defeating, right? So.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, so much. So this is Dr. Jennifer Rue, Director of Planetary Health at GW Center for Integrative Medicine. This is our GW-CIM YouTube podcast. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll be soon back thinking about how to do this more practical for everybody and do it more interactive. Hope you enjoyed it. Until soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.